Okay, part 3 of the Shifter Kart build. Haven't had a lot of time in the shed over the last couple of weeks. Just welcomed in a new son to the family, so gave birth to a little boy, or at least the wife did. I stood around and made jokes and generally didn't do any of the hard lifting. So Shifter Kart, from where you saw it last, I've managed to do a couple of things off camera. I think I did take some stills, so I'll stick them in if I have. But one of the big things was getting some of the controls on the motor. So if I bring you in, the difference between normal go-kart, like these two, I'll come over to my KT100. We've got a centrifugal clutch basically, so there are no gears, it's all single speed. Okay, so when we go from a standard kart, which you can see there's no controls either side of the steering wheel, it's just a brake pedal and an accelerator pedal. When we go from that to a shifter kart, we need a way to engage the clutch and shift gears. So on our shifter kart, this is what it looks like. We've got a clutch handle on the left and a gear shift on the right. So setting those up for this engine, once again, we've talked about this before. This is a vintage engine from the 1980s or early 1980s, and it was originally designed to be mounted on the left side of the kart. So we had to do some custom work to make this stuff work. First thing, which turned out to be easier than I thought, was knocking up this, which is a shift linkage. It takes the movement from the handle next to the steering wheel, runs it down to the shift lever coming off the engine. I didn't really know where to get one of those, and as like we've always talked about, don't like spending money. So I grabbed a couple of spare ones of these. I think we've talked about this before. These are steering arms. They're always getting bent when you're racing, so if you're new to racing, grab yourself some more steering arms as spares. I took 2 of those, cut the ends off, threaded the middle and put in a stud in here to give myself some length, and I just cut off the bent bits basically. So what that means is now when we pull the handle, if we pull the handle backwards, the shift fork comes backwards, and if we push the handle forwards, the shift lever goes forwards. So we can go through the gears like that, as you can see at the moment. Chain spinning, engine not spinning, so we're in neutral. I'll see if I can get it into gear. So let's try one backwards, there we go, big clunk. Now we're not going anywhere, so we're in gear now. Back into neutral. There we go, so that worked. Next issue was the clutch. This engine did come with the clutch cable, which was really nice, and the chassis did have the clutch lever, which was also really good, but there was nothing to hold the end of the cable. Now obviously when you're trying to pull any cable, you've got to hold the outer while you pull the centre of the cable through to get your clutch or your accelerator or brakes or whatever it may be that you're using a cable for to work. So that was missing. I don't know what this kart would have typically had in the first place. But as always, I wasn't going to go and spend a heap of money to find out. What I managed to dig through the spares box and come with a solution is this here. So this is another steering hub. So on a normal kart, like this, it's your steering hub that goes from the steering shaft up to the steering wheel. This is an angled one, but they all primarily do the same thing. So I had a spare one of those, a straight one. So what I did was drill out one of the steering wheel holes to hold the end of the cable, and then that slides up against the steering boss, which is originally part of the kart, and allows the cable to stay in one place while you pull the clutch. So you can see there, the inside cable is being lifted and lowered, and the outside of the cable is staying where it needs to be. So that's theoretically a working clutch. The next thing, and one of the things I talked about a while ago, was the exhaust. Exhaust was a real issue. I think we've shown this before. This is what came with the kart. I think it is its stock exhaust, but obviously it's been modified quite heavily. I think it was to be in a motorcycle, and it's beyond use, unfortunately. There's all sorts of pieces of wire and flat bar and even nails and stuff welded on there. There's a nail, all bronzed on there. So couldn't use that. Next thought was this, which is the Rotax Max 125 exhaust, being from the same family. I liked the idea of that, but fitment without major modifications was going to cause problems, and it's really heavy, so it's got to be mounted well. What I ended up going with was this exhaust. This is the stock exhaust off an X30, so this engine, but an older version of the exhaust. So it was one I had lying around for nothing. The issue was that we didn't have a header pipe that would match from the Rotax engine to the X30 exhaust. So I knocked one of those up, and I'll show you a couple of clips and pictures about how I did that. So for the exhaust, here's what we came up with. I ordered this little mandrel bend to make a header out of. You can see it's got a flare at one end, which is really nice. That fits onto our flange off the head. If I just pick that up quickly, our flange off the head quite well, although it is a little long, so I'm going to need to shorten that down. The other thing that's a little bit out is, if we have a look, set it up approximately where it's going to go, it's a 45-degree bend. If I leave it the way it is, it's going to put the muffler way too far backwards. So we need to get a little bit more bend into this. I can order these in more than 45. I think they come in 5-degree increments. So for today, I'm going to cut some relief cuts into the header tube and see what angle essentially I need, and then I can order a replacement later. I think they're only about, somewhere between $20 and $30 I paid for this, so it's not too much of a disaster. Let's get cutting and see what happens. So after our first attempt at modifying this mandrel bend, we've cut down the flare so it fits on the header better, so it's not too long now. However, that did mean that we had quite a problem. This was the original boot that sat out the back here, which was the alternate positioning of the carburetor, I suppose, and this was coming really tight against that 45-degree bend. So I've removed that, and once I've done that, we've got a lot more room. So I'll try and get some sort of a push-in cap, or maybe even a Welsh plug, a large Welsh plug to fill that hole, and that gives us a lot more room. We're still only 45 degrees. The stock ones on most engines will have you around about here, but just looking at it, we might not be too bad. So what I've got is this. This is just an OTK exhaust mount, which mounts to the bearing carrier and has quite a bit of adjustment. So what I'll do now is I'll mount that up, and then we'll have a look to see how the pipe's going to go between the header and lining up with our exhaust mount. We might get away without too much more bending. We'll see how we go. So after loosely bolting on our OTK exhaust mount, this is what we've come up with. So the 45 degree isn't actually too bad when I push that mount out as far as it can go. It doesn't look like it's low enough to have any problems with the rear bumper. So now the next thing we're going to have to try and do is take the flex joint, which is how this X30 muffler mounts to its stock header, and get that tacked onto our new header and see how that looks. Hopefully we can smidge a little bit of angle in there, and that'll help us to get it lined up nicely. So here's what we've ended up with. I ended up copying the length of the standard old style X30 header. I don't know if that'll work with this engine or not, but the good thing is this is a flex joint, so you can install larger or shorter pieces of flex, and that'll essentially lengthen or shorten the header before it goes into the muffler. So as I've said before, this muffler isn't designed for this engine. It's actually designed for this, which is the X30 engine, which we currently use. However, they've had a revision and a new exhaust layout installed on this engine. So this is the old one I had lying around. and as you'd be well aware, we don't like spending money. So here's what we've come up with. A little bit of mandrel bent pipe sent from an exhaust shop. I just welded it together with my gasless MIG, so the quality of the weld isn't show quality, but it'll be fine, it'll be strong, and I'll be able to sand it down a little bit to make it look pretty for those people who care. I had to take the muffler bracket from over where they'd usually sit over here. Actually, I've still got that sitting in the air. I'll put that back down. But from that side and put it over to the third bearing carrier here. I've got it spaced out at the moment. I'm going to have to make some adjustments or make a new arm here to fit, just because it doesn't really fit properly in either of the locations at the moment. So we'll mess around with that, hopefully get it a little bit further up the can if I'm coming from the left side of the card or not. But the exhaust is looking pretty good. So that's where we're up to at the moment on the Shifter Kart build. This is part 3, so if you're interested in the build, please do go back and watch parts 1 and 2. Do us a favour, if you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, that helps a lot. And if you like the content, please let us know by leaving a like or a comment. Next up on the build, as we move into part 4, we're going to look at some ancillaries around the engine. We're going to come up with a water cooling system. Then we've got to have a look at the electrics of the engine, and we might go ahead and get a seat and try and find a fitting floor tray to go in, so the majority of the chassis is complete and it's just about ready to fire. So thanks very much, guys. I hope you enjoy it, and we'll talk next time.